All right, let's jump right in. We're going to head back in time, all the way to the 1st century, to the busy, bustling Roman city of Corinth. And we're here to investigate a sacred meal that went so incredibly wrong, it basically threatened to blow a young church apart. So just imagine getting a letter from the guy who founded your community, and this is one of the first things you read. The Apostle Paul drops this absolute bombshell on the Corinthian church. This isn't just a friendly suggestion, he's telling them that their most important weekly gathering is actually doing more harm than good. So, that's the big question we're tackling. What on earth could be happening during a meal that's supposed to be about unity that would get such a harsh response? Well, to figure this out, we have to become cultural detectives and really understand the world they were living in.
And first up, we've got to get our heads around Corinth's dinner party rules. See, in a Roman city like this one, a meal was never, ever just a meal. It was basically a piece of social theater, designed to show everyone exactly where they stood on the social ladder.
Here's how it worked. The unspoken rules were all about status. If you were a wealthy host, you'd invite your equals, your peers, and also your social subordinates. Your friends got the best seats, the best food, the finest wine. Everyone else? Well, they got inferior treatment, basically the leftovers, and they were still expected to be thankful for it. The whole point was to show off your wealth and reinforce your power.
And the stage for these power plays was often a room that looked something like this, a triclinium. This was the formal dining room in a rich person's house, and it was literally designed for a small number of elite guests to recline in total comfort. Now keep this room in mind, because this very space is a huge clue to our mystery.
And this right here is where the problem starts brewing. The early church was this radical mix of people, rich, poor, slaves, free citizens, but since most of them lived in tiny, cramped apartments, they had no choice but to meet in the big, spacious homes of their wealthiest members. So suddenly, you have this community that preaches that everyone is equal, but they're meeting in a space that was specifically built to prove that they're not.
Which brings us to the heart of the conflict. When the Corinthian church gathered for what was supposed to be one supper, they were actually having two completely different meals at the exact same time in the exact same room.
So, picture this. The wealthy members who had free time would show up early with their own fancy food and wine, and they'd just start eating right away. They wouldn't wait. But the poorer members, many of whom were laborers or slaves, had to work late. They'd arrive later with empty hands, only to find that the party was already in full swing, the best food was gone, and they were left hungry and, frankly, humiliated.
Paul just puts it out there, as blunt as can be. He says, in the same room, at the same so-called community meal, some people were literally going hungry while others were getting drunk. It was a total failure of what it meant to be a church.
Now here's the crucial part. For Paul, this wasn't just bad manners. It wasn't a social slip-up. No. He accuses them of something way more serious, of showing contempt for the Church of God itself, and of deliberately shaming the members who had nothing. They were basically dragging the world's ugly, divisive social games right into the middle of their sacred gathering.
But Paul's criticism goes even deeper. The problem wasn't just that they were being insensitive. The real issue was a massive theological blind spot. They had completely forgotten why they were even sharing this meal in the first place.
So Paul has to take them all the way back to square one. He reminds them of the night Jesus was betrayed and the 4 simple things he did. He took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and then took the cup. The key words here he stresses are remembrance and new covenant. This meal was never, ever supposed to be just another dinner party.
See, the entire point of the meal was to remember and proclaim the death of Jesus, a sacrifice that leveled the playing field for everybody. It erased all those social distinctions and created one single new family, made up of rich and poor, slave and free all together. Their meal was supposed to be a living, breathing demonstration of that new reality.
And right here, you can see the fundamental clash of values. A typical Corinthian banquet was all about reinforcing status and creating divisions. The Lord's Supper was all about proclaiming unity through a shared sacrifice. The Corinthians were trying to do both at the same time, and it was a spiritual disaster. They were polar opposites.
So, after this incredibly sharp diagnosis of the problem, what was Paul's solution? Well, turns out it wasn't some complicated theological formula. In fact, it was incredibly practical, and it was aimed right at healing the community's broken heart. Paul's instructions were stunningly direct. First, and this is huge, wait for one another. That simple act of patience would immediately turn them from a collection of individuals back into one group. Second, if you're just starving, eat at home beforehand. This gathering wasn't about filling your stomach. It was about something symbolic, something communal. The goal was crystal clear: stop shaming the poor and start remembering what this meal is actually about.
And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. Paul's letter to Corinth is like a mirror held up to any community. It shows us that the way we eat together, who gets the best seat, who eats first, who is honored, it reveals everything about what we truly believe about each other. It's a question that is just as powerful today as it was 2,000 years ago. What do our shared meals say about us?